Well, that was fascinating. We'll get into the details of everything that played out last night in America. And that's in the 2024 race. Of course, David Drucker will be joining us to discuss that at 4 o'clock. Hans von Spakovsky is here at 4:30 as Donald Trump heads to Georgia to be arrested yet again by the left, which loves imprisoning their political opponents. Jason Miyares, the Attorney General, that is, of the Commonwealth of Virginia, will be with us at 5 o'clock today. We have lots of questions for him on these school systems in the state that are in open revolt against the voters. And, of course, we will talk to you at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. Who won the debate last night? The debate on stage. Who won that debate? What did you think of their performance? Any standouts to you? Any moments that caught your attention? I'd love to hear them. 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. Of course, Donald Trump, who is the way out front runner in this race, did not the debate, but instead that interview with Tucker Carlson last night. It aired last night. It was taped last week. And as of this moment, I'm staring at the numbers here. Twitter says that it has somewhere in the vicinity of 231 million views. That's the data. That's the metric that they use. My understanding is in order to be considered a view, someone has had to stare at that video for at least 2 seconds. So that would catch a lot of people, perhaps incidentally. But it is in kind of in internet parlance, at least 231 million impressions. That is a lot of people. That's we're verging on 250 million impressions for a conversation between the former president of the United States and the former Fox News host, Tucker Carlson. I will be playing audio from that coming up. For his part, Donald J. Trump on his Truth Social account has just posted here recently. He writes about today's events. The following. He says 231 million views and still counting, referencing the video. The biggest video on social media ever. More than double the Super Bowl, he says. But please excuse me, I have to start getting ready to head down to Atlanta, Georgia, where murder and other violent crimes have reached levels never seen before, to get arrested, all caps, by a radical left, lowlife district attorney, Fani Willis, for a perfect phone call. And having the audacity to challenge a rigged and stolen election. The evidence is irrefutable. Arrest time, 7:30 p.m. So there he is, former President Trump saying 7:30 p.m. this evening, he will be placed under arrest in Fulton County, Georgia, over claims that he tried to overturn the election and for daring to ask officials in Georgia to audit their vote tallies to ensure that they were authentic. That's what he's being arrested for. A bunch of his affiliates, people close to him, his attorneys, former campaign workers, all subject to arrest in the last 24 hours. All turning themselves in, all having their mug shots taken, some of them choosing to smile, others choosing to just stare into the camera blankly. Many of them making those images now their social media photos to represent themselves in public, to emphasize the persecution that they're now enduring at the hands of the out-of-control left. One other piece here, and then I want to move into some of the debate. At the moment, there is a request from the House Judiciary Committee and Congressman Jim Jordan. They have sent a letter to Georgia, and they're demanding answers on whether or not the Fulton County District Attorney, Fani Willis, has in any way coordinated with the federal government in pursuing these charges against Donald Trump and all of his associates. He references at the top of the letter the 41-count indictment brought on August 14th against 19 defendants, including a former president of the United States and a current declared candidate for that office related to the 2020 election. He goes through all of the things that she alleges. And he also says it's noteworthy that just 4 days before this indictment, you launched a new campaign fundraising website that highlighted your investigation into President Trump. How about that? Additionally, the forewoman of the special grand jury that you convened, remember her, the crazy forewoman in Georgia, to investigate President Trump earlier this year, bragged during an unusual media tour about her excitement at the prospect of subpoenaing President Trump and getting to swear him in. The Judiciary Committee, again, demanding answers here on whether or not Fani Willis has been coordinating with the Biden administration here. So I'd like to know some of those answers too. And that would, of course, be relevant to the role that Congress plays because they delegate federal funding. And if the executive branch is spending money on hassling Joe Biden's political opponent, then the House Judiciary Committee is entitled to that information. So we'll see what happens there. Let me move on to the debate now. The presidential debate that took place last night, it was kind of strange to have a debate where you don't have the front runner on stage, but you did have a debate. And as it played out, I have to say, from my perspective, Vivek Ramaswamy won the night. Vivek Ramaswamy, the tech entrepreneur, made the best use of his time on stage. He was efficient in his delivery. He has clearly learned all of the right lessons from Trump. He represented himself as the outsider, as the newcomer, the fresh blood, the guy who's prepared to take down the establishment. He's not, as he put it, bought and paid for like everybody else on the stage. That was one of the declarations he made last night. It was very Trump-esque, wasn't it? It reminded me of Trump in 2016, where Trump says, as people are booing him in one of the primary debates, he points to the crowd and says, "These people aren't real. These are donors," to the other candidates on stage. And they booed louder, but the audience at home got the message. They said, that makes sense. Yeah, they're a bunch of donors have filled the room. The tickets were handed out to people who are intimately familiar, intimately involved in the political campaigns of each of the people standing on that stage. It's not a real representative sample of America. Trump winning on that front. I thought Vivek did the same thing. You know, Vivek was number 3 in the polling going into yesterday's debate. Number 2 was Ron DeSantis. DeSantis, unfortunately for him, his answers were good. I'll stipulate up front. I thought his answers were very solid. I thought every time he had a chance on the microphone, he sounded good. He sounded competent. He sounded like the governor of Florida, who has been such a wild success in the Sunshine State. But he didn't take advantage of the stage time. He didn't fight for more. The Fox moderators lost control of the stage on a number of occasions, and occasionally when they lose control, they cede some of the time to the people who are speaking, and they let them have it if they fight hard enough. DeSantis should have done that. But instead, DeSantis kind of faded into the background. At times, I was kind of convinced that Doug Burgum was speaking more than Ron DeSantis was, or Asa Hutchinson, the guys who are polling at the very bottom of the race. That's unusual in a presidential debate. So DeSantis, while solid, didn't have the performance he could have last night. One other piece on DeSantis, and then I want to take some of your calls on this, 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. There are a lot of people today litigating a moment yesterday where the candidates were asked to raise their hands if they promised that they would support Donald Trump as the nominee if he were to be convicted. Now, I'm looking at the calendar, I don't think Trump will end up being convicted of anything prior to Election Day 2024. I'm fairly certain that all of these ridiculous trials, these political hits, are going to be dragging on throughout the election. So the chances of him being convicted ahead of that seem, I think, off. I could be wrong. But they were asked anyway, if in the event that Trump were convicted, would you continue to support him? Would you support him? And show of hands on this question. Now, I do have the audio of this, right? I'm glancing for this. So let me pull it up for you. My apologies that I don't have it so immediately available. So without playing it. Raise your hands if you're going to support him. Most of the stage did. Vivek first. Vivek was first. Nikki Haley goes next. Then you had Tim Scott. He goes next. Doug Burgum. He goes next. I'm watching down the stage as this is happening. Then right next to Vivek Ramaswamy, center stage, you have Ron DeSantis looks around like he's trying to measure the stage and the audience reaction, and then he raises his hand. And then right after that, Pence raises his hand that he would still support Trump if he were convicted. At least that's what it looked like on stage. Now, everyone is interpreting this as Ron DeSantis was taking the temperature of the stage and the audience first, and then he raised his hand. That's how everybody's talking about this. But I need to remind you of something that happened earlier in the debate, useful context, that I think changes the way you assess that moment. Remember, the first hand-raising exercise that Fox put forward was asking the candidates about climate change. They asked the candidates to raise their hands if they believe in the threat of climate change. Who here does? And DeSantis stopped that. He actually jumped out and he said, wait a second, no, we shouldn't have to raise our hands like we're a bunch of school children. Let's just answer the question, he says. And then he begins answering the question. Now, that was a rule that DeSantis had established on the stage early in the debate, where he said, no, we're not raising our hands like school children. So the next time a question comes up, asking them to raise their hands, as DeSantis said, like school children, the rule that he had already arranged is, I'm not going to do that. But then what ends up happening is everyone does start raising their hands around the stage. That's when he looks around and goes, well, I got to obviously be on the side of supporting Trump here because I support Trump, even if he's convicted. And then DeSantis' hand goes up. I'm telling you, I know that this is a moment that everyone's clipping and sharing, and it looks terrible for DeSantis. And like I said, I think DeSantis did a poor job of taking time for himself on that stage yesterday. But I think he's being unfairly hit for this moment. I don't think that he was taking the temperature of the stage. I think that he was honestly trying to live up to the rule that he had built, which is, I'm not going to raise my hand for these stupid hand-raising questions. And then he was kind of forced into a position. I think that's what happened. Let me take some calls now. 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. Donna's calling in from Frederick. Line 1. Donna, good afternoon. You're on the Vince Coglianese Show.
Good afternoon, Vince. I want to first off say that credit to all of them for even getting up there in this crazy environment we've all been subjugated to. And I want to say I went back and forth between the two. And
the two events. You went back and forth between the debate and the Trump interview with Tucker.
Yeah, and some of the moments with the debate were kind of frustrating to me. But that being said, I think there are four people, and I think Dan even mentioned them in the front, that stood out to me, Vivek. And I haven't ruled Ron out, even though he's getting beaten up pretty badly. You know, just the fact that they're there amazes me. Like I said, because who would really want to be in this position Trump's in right now? It's disgusting. And to Trump's credit, he was very presidential last night. I learned some things I wasn't aware of. He was very measured. And Vivek was very interesting. He knows a lot about a lot of different things. So I liked him. I've always liked Ron as a governor. I think he's pretty much done a good job. Most of Florida's content with him. I don't know if he's lost his mojo somewhere along the line. Nikki Haley, I'd like to see more from her. And, I could go on about these, but I think overall it was good for conservatives. The whole thing was good for us. But I got to say that Trump going up against the GOP, that was a very loud statement, and it worked very much in his favor.
Trump going up against the GOP? You mean in 2016?
Yes. No, now. Like airing that show against
yes. I see what you're saying.
Candidates.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yes. Yeah, that was powerful. And it was shrewd, actually.
Well, it was also a declaration for him that he's like, look, and he's said as much. He's not hiding the reasoning here. He's saying, look, I'm so far ahead. Why would I go on stage and then make myself vulnerable to an all-out onslaught? I don't need to do that.
Exactly.
That was the position he took.
Yeah.
All right, Donna.
I can't wait to see where they end up. It'll be fun to see where the candidates end up regardless.
You've got the right attitude about this.
Yeah, we're in for an adventure.
Yeah, that's for sure. We always are. Donna, thank you. Yeah, it's okay. I like Donna watched what I was switching back and forth because I watched the debate last night, and then on the commercial breaks, on each of the Fox News commercial breaks, I would flip on the video and watch Trump and Tucker. And then as soon as the debate was coming back, I'd write down the time code where I was in the Trump-Tucker interview, and then I'd return to it on the subsequent commercial break. And I was doing the best I could. I was trying to efficiently consume everything last night. But boy, she's right. Donna's right. It was totally interesting. I thought the debate stage was very lively last night, and I thought some people embarrassed themselves. I thought some of those candidates demonstrated that they are not in touch with the current situation the American people are suffering through. Others came out very strongly. I already told you, I thought Vivek came out very strongly last night. All right, more in a moment.
If former President Trump is convicted in a court of law, would you still support him as your party's choice? Please raise your hand if you would.
Most of the stage raising their hand. DeSantis doing it a little slow, but like I said, I think that was the product of his rule that he didn't want to raise hands like a school child. Let's see. Leo is calling in from Colorado, line 3. Leo, good afternoon. You're on the Vince Coglianese Show.
Hey, Vince. Long time no talk.
Yes, sir.
When Vivek asked, and made the statement of all these people are bought and paid for, I'm surprised one of the 7 candidates, the other ones, didn't say, oh, you mean like George Soros paying for your education?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because he accepted a grant in law school, I believe, from the Soros family, Paul Soros, I think.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. But still, he should have brought that up and said, oh, yeah. He even admitted in that article that, he was already a millionaire and he didn't really need it. But
yeah, I think the line that he's been saying on that subject is, I would have been an idiot not to take that money. It was available, so I took it. It reminds me in some ways of Trump. Trump, remember, had the Clintons at his wedding. He donated to Joe Biden. Yeah. He donated to Kamala Harris. He's over the time back when they were running for Senate. And he used that to his advantage. He said, yeah, that's because I knew the system. I knew how to work the system. And that's why I'd be great as president. Kind of interesting stuff. Leo, thank you. Yeah, no, sometimes you see these candidates miss an opportunity for a good retort. And you snap your fingers and go, man, that was your chance. You screwed it up. All right, more of your calls in a moment. What'd you think of this? And also, we'll play some of this audio from Donald Trump and Tucker Carlson. Well, good afternoon to you. 3:35 here at News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up, 4 o'clock, David Drucker is with us. We'll talk about the battle for 2024. In fact, he's written a book on that subject. Hans von Spakovsky is here at 4:30 to talk about election laws and what is happening in Georgia as good old Fannie Willis is indicting Donald Trump. Trump set to be arrested tonight at 7:30, he has announced on Truth Social in Georgia. Jason Miyares, the Attorney General of Virginia, is here at 5 o'clock. We'll talk about the school systems in Virginia and how some of them are in open revolt against the people of Virginia. And you can join us today at 888-630-9625. 888-630-WMAL. We're covering the aftermath of this debate last night, also this interview between Donald Trump and Tucker Carlson. I did think it was interesting watching how Fox had arranged this debate. The Fox News Channel hosting the debate at 9 o'clock last night. The first few minutes of it, they had an excellent rendition of the national anthem. That was phenomenal. The woman's name was Natalie Grant, who sang it. She sounded so good. And then they cut to a montage. It was voiced by Brit Hume, the longtime Fox News analyst, former host of Special Report on that channel. And I thought it was interesting because I'm watching all of the production values and qualities of it to assess, like, how is Fox trying to communicate to its audience right now? And I almost got the sense, how some people don't go to church on any other time of year except Christmas and Easter? We call them creasters in the Catholic Church, but you get maybe this is the first time that a bunch of people have been watching Fox News since Tucker Carlson was fired. I mean, Fox has to be contemplating this. We got to appeal to this audience. There's a huge number of people in our audience who liked Tucker, who certainly like Trump, and Trump's not here on this stage tonight. So what can we do to make sure they know that we're in their corner and we're going to fight for them? So this massive intro on the front of the debate that kept stretching on and on. I was like, when are they going to get to the debate? Because they kept showing all of this various imagery. And you could sense it. It was with a purpose, right? They played footage, for instance, of the George Floyd riots in 2020 and the state that the left put our country in. It wasn't January 6th. It was the 2020 riots, the far more damaging and destructive riots from that year. And that has a purpose, right? The audience sees that and they go, that's right. At least somebody's got their eye on the ball. And then the very first question was predicated on that song, Rich Men North of Richmond. They actually played a portion of the song, and I said, very smart, because conservatives, by and large, they like that song. They identify with it. They share in that man's desperation for the state of our country. And then they use that as a way, kind of a springboard to have all the candidates begin answering questions. So that was, I thought, fascinating on the part of Fox News. They were obviously, clearly trying to communicate with the audience there. A downside of Fox's broadcast was at one point they ran a TikTok ad. Did you see the TikTok advertisement? If you were watching the debate, halfway through, it was not at a good moment either. It was like right near one of the China portions of the debate. And they ran a full, I think it was a 30-second spot for TikTok. Like, look, Fox advertising department. I realize you're trying to take money where you can get it. Don't run the TikTok ad. Nobody likes TikTok. TikTok, the spy vehicle, the social distortion company. It's just a bad idea. So the TikTok ad ran during the debate. And then, of course, the other problem for Fox is there were times where there was like everything kind of got out of control. And I wasn't sure who was in charge. I wasn't sure if it was Brett or Martha who were the quarterback at any given moment. It felt like the two of them, one would be like, okay, you can go on for 30 seconds. Oh, we're going to move on to the other topic. It almost felt like they were both in charge. You know, too many cooks in the kitchen at the same time. It's one of those things where you'd be like, okay, you're in charge. You ask questions too. And if there's any disputes, first person, you're in charge. And we move on. So, there were some hiccups. It's the first debate. Fox has got another one, I think, coming up, in a month? They got the Fox Business thing. So they'll have refined it a bit. Yeah, that was an interesting broadcast. But what did you make of all of it? What did you make of specifically the candidates and their performance last night? Anybody stand out to you? And, of course, I'm going to play some of this Trump audio, too. 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. Let me take Mike calling in from Gainesville now, line 1. Mike, good afternoon. You're on the Vince Coglianese Show.
Hey, Vince, good afternoon. Good to talk to you.
Nice to talk to you.
Yeah, I thought the little dust-up between Vivek and Nikki Haley was kind of interesting. I was curious to know, does she really think that America needs Israel more than Israel needs America? That was a strange point she was trying to make.
Did that kind of knock you back a bit? I heard her say that. I'm like, what? I'm sorry. I cringed when I heard her say that. Like, I get the point that she's trying to make. Let me just play some of the audio for you. This is the moment that you're talking about, Mike. Here is Nikki Haley interrupting. And this was about, Vivek's, the predicate here is that Vivek was asked recently about foreign aid. And I think he had suggested that he would like to limit some of the foreign aid we're sending to Israel. And then after that answer, he began to refine how he talks about this and says, we need to put Israel in a position to stand on its own 2 feet. We have to do the Abraham Accords 2.0. We have to have all these bilateral relationships between Arab states and Israel so that Israel can live in peace. And we should have, we should derive a bunch of lessons from Israel, including on border security. They're very smart on protecting their borders. Here's how Nikki Haley responded to that.
I want to learn from those and apply those to protect our homeland, Nikki.
Israel
that
needs
is the answer.
America. America needs Israel.
Okay.
It's not that Israel needs America, she said, which of course Israel does need American support right now. She said, America needs Israel, she said. And so that caused you to reel back, Mike.
Yeah, I would like to see her expound on that. Somebody should hold her feet to the fire and make her try to explain that, in greater detail, how she thinks that's even possibly true. But
right.
It was kind of interesting what Vivek was talking about. She should be on the boards of Raytheon and Lockheed in the future because she's such a warmonger. That was a good line on his part.
That was unbelievable. That was an amazing moment. I actually thought that he was firing some nukes there. Let me see. I do have audio of these two mixing it up. Here is Nikki Haley saying of Vivek that he has no foreign policy experience. Here's what she said.
So the reality
make America less safe. You have no foreign policy experience, and it shows.
And you know what? The foreign policy experience that you all have shows in the pointless wars we've gotten into. I have to address that. So our relationship with Israel will never be stronger than by the end of my first term. But it's not a client relationship. It is a friendship. And you know what friends do? Friends help each other stand on their own 2 feet.
Yeah, so that's his explanation for how to handle Israel. I thought, what did you think, Mike? I thought Vivek was very, adept, very capable last night.
I don't think there's any question he's capable. He's ahead of schedule, I think, politically, but I'm not sure what he's aiming for. He said he doesn't want to be VP, so he's not going to displace Trump. So I'm not sure what he's heading for, but in the future, he could be huge.
Yeah, I agree. I think he's got a future. Thank you, Mike. I appreciate the phone call. Yeah, that was a weird moment. The Nikki Haley emphasizing that we need Israel more than Israel needs us. It's a strange way to view America. Let's see here. I've got Adrian calling in from Albuquerque right now. Line 3. Adrian, good afternoon.
Hey, good afternoon, Vince. Vince, I was just wanting to make the comment regarding how the moderators seem to lose control of the debate at the very beginning, because for most of the time it just seemed that the candidates were just yapping over each other.
Right, and so the problem with that is it becomes very difficult to hear anybody. You know, it's like, it's one thing if you and I are in a room, Adrian. This is why you can sit in a busy restaurant and a bunch of conversations can be going on, and you can choose which one to follow. It's not like that on radio and television. If people are speaking over each other, it becomes very hard to discern the words, and that's what you saw last night.
Yes, and I also, something I didn't like was the applause and the cheering from the audience. I don't know if maybe it was just me or the people I was watching it with, but it just sounded kind of staged. All the whistling and the whooping up, and I don't know, it just didn't really sound quite normal to me.
No, and it's for this kind of the same reasons that Trump identified in the past. Each of the campaigns get a number of tickets to this thing. They have their own supporters in the room. I wouldn't have thought that there'd be a big Chris Christie cheer section. Yet, you get one of those. You're right. It is an odd feature. And you had Brett Baer at one point had to turn around and look at the audience and say, guys, we can't continue the debate if they keep getting interrupted by all of the noise. Please give us the opportunity to ask these questions and get these answers. Adrian, thank you. Appreciate the call here. Let's see. John in South Carolina, line 1. John, good afternoon. You're on the Vince Coglianese Show.
Good afternoon, Vince. Hey, I'm listening to everybody talk about this, and yeah, we can analyze how they all did and everything, and Vivek did great, and so on. But I just don't think the Republicans know what time it is. We're in a different time right now. Essentially, our front-runner nominee is getting booked into court.
Yes.
In Atlanta. I mean, where's the outrage on that? Where's the talk about election integrity?
Yes.
Are we gonna sit back in 24 and watch him drag suitcases full of ballots in at 4 a.m? Again?
Yep. Great questions. No conversation on election integrity last night. I mean, very little. Actually, I think to the extent that it came up at all, I think Vivek, maybe this was in the spin room after, but he had indicated that we need to obviously fix our election and have paper ballots and vote on election day. I think his position is that he wants a federal holiday for election day. So if people just go and vote in person and no more of this nonsense, complicated, ridiculous black box election system that the left's created. And that gets right to the point you're making, John, which is we need to address the issues that are fundamental to keeping this country going.
I mean, essentially, the way I look at it, Donald Trump, if he was rightfully elected in 20, which I believe he was, and most Republicans believe it was stolen from, if you look at the polls, he's essentially the incumbent. They should be rallying around him. Granted, I know everybody can run. It's an open primary. But don't they realize that the left is going to go after them the same way?
That's for sure.
This precedent.
Yeah, and Trump said so much.
Do is throw their opponents in jail.
Trump said that last night too. He said, that if for any reason he didn't make it to the finish line here, they're all going to go after you the same way they go after me. That's what he's been saying.
Guarantee it.
John, thank you. In fact, on John's point, on some of the deeper questions that should have come up, I did think there was an interesting moment between Mike Pence and Vivek Ramaswamy, where Pence tried to get a dunk in on Vivek, because Vivek was saying that we're in a very dark time in this country. Now, would you agree with that? Do you think we're in a dark time? It is. It is. There's a lot of rough stuff going on, and he talked about how America's in the midst of an identity crisis. We have a lot of young people who are wandering around without a sense of purpose or meaning. He said that we have a tremendous amount of fatherlessness, which is leading to a very chaotic country. And Mike Pence tried to turn this into, oh, how dare you attack the American people. Listen to this moment.
We don't have an identity crisis, Vivek. We're not looking for a new national identity. The American people are the most faith-filled, freedom-loving, idealistic, hardworking people the world has ever known. We just need government as good as our people.
Well, Mike, I think the difference is you might have, some others like you may have on the stage, it's Morning in America speech. It is not Morning in America. We live in a dark moment, and we have to confront the fact that we're in an internal, sort of cold cultural civil war. And we have to recognize
the American people with the failed government in Washington, D.C. We just need government as good as our people again.
So let me just finish addressing that slogan, because I don't know what that slogan means. We need to shut down the administrative state. That's actually how we translate it.
Yeah, so let me tell you here. I'm just going to score this objectively. Pence is completely wrong. Pence is completely wrong about what's happening in our country right now. He says this is just about the government. Are you familiar with Google? Are you familiar with Facebook? Are you familiar with Twitter up until the moment it was owned by Elon Musk, and potentially even beyond? Are you familiar with the meddling of all of these major institutions? Are you familiar with the effect that organizations like TikTok have had on our young people? On what is happening to our youngest generation? The collapse in patriotism in our country, pride in our country is hitting rock bottoms. Faith in God itself. Pence alluded at the top of that. He said that we are faith-filled as a country. That is not as true as it once was. Faith is collapsing in this country. Belief in God is collapsing in this country. Vivek appropriately identified fatherlessness as one of the great problems that we're facing as a society. It's not unique to any demographic. It cuts across all demographics. It is a massive problem. And by the way, those two things are interconnected. Fatherlessness and the collapse in faith in our country, they are very interconnected, those two things. You know, I just got back from vacation. While I was on vacation, I was reading and came across a concept which I loved, and I think it's really important. It's instructive. It's just advice for Catholic men. It was advice for Catholic men, and I was reading through it, and it points out that the man's job in a household is to be the spiritual leader of his home. That is the man's job in his household. The spiritual leader of his home. And in order for a child to have a sense of who God the Father is, God the Father, what kind of relationship do you have with God the Father? How do you detect that God the Father has a loving relationship with you? How do you go to him for advice? You have to have a frame of reference for that relationship. How do you even understand what it means to have a relationship with God the Father if you don't have a meaningful relationship with a human father? Where do you find the frame of reference? Is it possible to? Absolutely. Is it a lot harder? Absolutely. So in a society where fatherlessness is exploding, of course godlessness is also exploding. Those two things are deeply intertwined. So our last caller just said these candidates have an obligation to recognize what time it is, whether it's talking about election integrity or any of the other issues that are deeply important to the people. And I'm not under some belief that Vivek Ramaswamy is going to become the nominee. At this moment, Donald Trump is going to become the nominee, barring some unforeseen circumstance. But he is correctly identifying a rot that's in our country that has to be confronted and addressed. The future of our country absolutely depends on it, and Mike Pence has no idea what's going on right now. Or at least if he does, he's concealing it inside of some lip service about how wonderful the people of this country are and how dare you attack them. He knows Vivek wasn't doing that. Yes, the future of our country is at stake. This is why these debates are so important. All right, still Trump audio ahead, I promise. Let me take a phone call. I've got Wayne calling in on only line 9. Wayne, good afternoon. You're on the Vince Coglianese Show.
Hi there. Vince, I couldn't help but to hear you talk about the fact that, or agree that Yeah, the candidate should be talking about, stolen election or election fraud.
Election integrity, yes.
Election integrity.
Yeah.
I'm going to say this. Do you remember when right before the midterms, you had that guy on there, a pollster who has a perfect record? Actually, they say he only got one wrong, and that was the Donald Trump 2020 race.
Yeah,
right? So
that's Trafalgar, I think, is the polling firm. Now,
do you remember when you started asking him about Senate races around the country, and he got to Pennsylvania, and he refused to give a prediction because he said, I don't know, they got a lot of like to predict there. They got a lot of different ways they can do things, meaning clearly, you had no curiosity, by the way, meaning clearly they have 8 ways to Sunday to steal an election. I think that the talking heads, of which you're one, I say that with respect, could have been for the past 2.5 years, however long it's been, investigating this more, having more interviews. For instance, the county in Wisconsin that had more votes for Biden than they had citizens or something, Arizona. How was that race clearly stolen? No interviews there.
Okay, one second. Wayne, 1 second. You say it with respect, but not with much. So obviously you haven't been listening a lot because we've done this endlessly.
You talk around the edges
on this program. I don't talk around the edges. Wayne, how about this? How about the media manipulation is clearly an election rigging? How about the CIA? Wait, stand by, Wayne. You made a lot of claims. Now keep your mouth shut and listen to me. You got CIA manipulation, FBI manipulation. You have 2,000 mules in Georgia. We covered that extensively. You have the Pennsylvania accepting ballots after Election Day in the 2020 election. That is against the state constitution, against the state rules. You have ballot curing problems in that same state where people are taking ballots back and then changing them, of government officials changing them. You have Stacey Abrams' sister in Georgia, a judge who didn't allow an audit of the state voter rolls going into the special election in Georgia. These are all things we've covered extensively. You have corrupt ballot harvesting going on in states across the country where political operatives are taking the ballots and then turning in the ones they feel like in order to advantage the candidate of choice, which turns out to be a Democrat in almost every case. Sir, you say this with respect. I don't sense a lot of respect because we've been talking about it here on this program. I'll give you the benefit of the doubt. With respect, listen to the podcast.